Fort King was a typical U.S. Army frontier fort and a noteworthy symbol of the longest and costliest war America had with its native people, the Seminole War. Fort King is a narrative that speaks of a complicated history as it relates to the occupation of the state of Florida and beyond. It is a story of a young country struggling to thrive and the native inhabitants trying also to survive. Fort King stood at the edge of where a line had been drawn, a line that divided land designated for the Seminole from land American settlers wanted for themselves. As the line was redefined time and time again, the extensiveness battle ensued. From one side of the line, this was a battle intended to remove a hostile threat and to pave the way for settlers. But from the other side of the line, it was a battle against unwarranted aggression and theft of a land and a way of life that had belonged to the people native to this land. Fort King's position in the center of the state and at the northern border of the Seminole Reservation made it one of the most important posts in support of the federal mandates. Throughout the war, it was commonly said, all roads lead to Fort King, and in fact they did. In 1827, Colonel Duncan L. Clinch described the post's importance as follows. From my knowledge of the Indian character, I consider the post of more importance in controlling the Indians and in giving protection and security to the inhabitants of Florida than any other post in the territory. It is in the immediate vicinity of the largest number of the Florida Indians and between them and the white inhabitants. Beyond its geographical and strategic location, Fort King is a site that ignited the Second Seminole War. This fort put Osceola front and center in the popular culture. It is here at Fort King that Osceola was first taken captive and shamed in front of his people by the Indian removable agent Wiley Thompson. Fort King, Congress and the Secretary of the Department of Interior designated it a National Historic Landmark on February 24, 2004. The history begins with the sounds of the soldiers, the wagons making their way through the nearby forest in search of a site to build a fort. The year was 1827. As trees fell and construction began, the fort would be named in honor of Colonel William King, commander of the 4th Infantry. It was constructed to administrate the Treaty of Moultrie Creek, which relocated Seminoles to a large reservation in central Florida. Instead of a symbol of freedom and hope and justice, Fort King and its soldiers became a symbol of hate and oppression, and it was on that stage that a new Seminole stepped forward. His name was Osceola. Osceola made his first appearance to the world at Fort King in October of 1834. The defiant young war chief rejected U.S. orders and threatened war unless the Seminoles were left alone. Tensions continued to rise. 2 companies of U.S. regulars under the command of Major Francis Dade were dispatched from Fort Brooke in Tampa to reinforce the troops at Fort King. On the morning of December 28, 1835, they were ambushed and annihilated by the band of Seminoles under the leadership of Seminole warrior Micanopy. That afternoon, Osceola shot and killed Indian agent Wiley Thompson as he stepped out of Fort King in an afternoon walk. The Second Seminole War had begun during the 7-year war that followed. Every major general and regiment of the U.S. Army either stationed at or passed through the gates of Fort King. Fort King was once again abandoned. This time it was burned to the ground by the vicious Seminoles. The victory, however, was short-lived. 1 year later, in 1837, the U.S. Army returned and built the fort. This time the Army of the South would direct dragoon, infantry units, an unrelenting search and destroy missions against the Seminoles. At the war's end in 1842, most of the Seminoles had been killed or captured and moved to Oklahoma. The Seminoles that were moved to Oklahoma make up the Seminole Nation of today. A small number of unconquered and defiant Seminoles withdrew to the vastness of the Florida Everglades and are now known today as the Seminole Tribe of Florida. In 1842, the war had ended. Marion County, the fort then became the county's first courthouse and public buildings. In 1846, it was dismantled for its lumber, and the courthouse moved into the new city of Ocala. Fort King is a link to our past and our future. Standing on the hilltop, Fort King puts us in the very footsteps of the Indians and the soldiers that roamed our city and county before we arrived. It is how we got here, it is our story, and in our very midst, it is the exact spot where it all happened. Today, the reconstruction of Fort King serves us as an ongoing exploration of our past, informing our understanding of historical events and how they shaped us individually and collectively. Chief Osceola was really not a chief. He was born in Alabama, and his name was really Billy Powell. He became an influential leader of the Seminole people in Florida. His mother was Creek, and his great-great-grandfather was a redoubtable Scotsman named James McQueen. He was reared by his mother in the Creek tradition. When he was a child, they migrated to Florida with other Red Stick refugees, led by a half-breed relative, Peter McQueen. After their group's defeat in 1814 in the Creek Wars, they became part of what was known as the Seminole people. It's a trail leading to the Daughters of the Revolution Cemetery. So we'll go check this one out too. I bet they didn't have a water line back then. Doesn't look like there's any gravestones here unless they're laying in the ground, but I don't see any. As this marks the burying ground of the soldiers and civilians who died at Fort King during the Seminole War in 1835 to 1842. Fort King occupied the hill to the northeast and was established as a military post in 1827. This was erected by the Ocala chapter, Daughters of the American Revolution, in 1933. We've even got a little lily growing right here. That tree. These are big, beautiful oak trees down here in Florida. This one over here, bent right over. In honor of those who died at Fort King during the Seminole Wars, the Ocala Chapter Daughters of the American Revolution, the Brick City Garden Club, and the City of Ocala dutifully bring prominence to this monument for the respect and admiration of all who gathered here. 2018.